John Diefenbaker was born on September 18, 1895, was the 13th Prime Minister of Canada. He was born to William Thomas Diefenbaker and Mary Florence Bannerman in Ontario. As his father was a teacher focusing on politics and history, he became a main influence in John's political career. His father was of German descent and his mother was of Scottish descent. Early on in his life, Mr. Diefenbaker and his family moved to Saskatchewan for a job opportunity for his father. When John and his younger brother Elmer began attending university, their family moved to Saskatoon so they could study in the University of Saskatchewan. When attending the University of Saskatchewan, Mr. Diefenbaker received his Bachelor of Arts degree in 1915 and the Master of Arts the following year. He was part of the military for a short period of time before returning to the university due to an injury to complete his law degree. He later became a lawyer in the village of Okawa, Saskatchewan. Mr. Diefenbaker married his wife in 1922, Beth Noel, but she later died of tuberculosis. Diefenbaker also had to go through surgery as he had internal bleeding and feared that the disease had been treated to him. John Diefenbaker's first attempt at politics was in 1925 for the federal riding of Prince Albert, but came third behind both the Liberal and Progressive candidates. After constant changes between prime ministers the following year, John Diefenbaker, as a Conservative, ran against Mackenzie King. Mackenzie King beat John Diefenbaker easily and in 1926 regained his position as Prime Minister. In 1929, John Diefenbaker married Edna Brower, a teacher from Saskatoon who later died in 1951. In 1933, John Diefenbaker ran for mayor of Prince Albert, being beat by 48 votes in an election where 2,000 votes were cast. In 1935, the president of the Saskatchewan Conservative Party was appointed to become a judge. Diefenbaker, the vice president at the time, became the acting president. So let's fast forward to the 1957 election. After St. Laurent announced that the parliament would dissolve and there would be an election that year, John Diefenbaker was chosen as the leader of the Progressive Conservative. As John Diefenbaker was 61 at the time, he would not be able to hold office for a while. Yet the party overlooked that because they believed that the Tories would win the election. When the Liberals released their budget, Diefenbaker attacked on high taxes, failure to assist the elderly, and the lack of aid in the poorer provinces, which became his platform for his campaign. In the polls the day before the elections, the Liberals were 3-1 and Conservative. Yet St. Laurent's campaign was that the Canadians had no other choice than to vote for him. John Diefenbaker later went on to win the election by a mere 200,000 votes, not a majority, but a minority government. Diefenbaker made his Secretary of State, Ellen Fairclough, the first female to hold a cabinet post, and Michael Starr as the Ministry of Labour, the first Canadian of Ukrainian descent to hold a cabinet post. Diefenbaker stayed to his word and decreased taxes, increased the old age pension by $9, which is over $60 in today's money, and increased aid to poorer provinces. Yet as his actions were helpful, they put Canada in a deficit of $650 million in 1958. This resulted in the Minister of Finance and the Bank of Canada governor to reinstate the victory bonds. After Diefenbaker retired, he ran in his home riding of Prince Albert, winning comfortably. He died 2 months after this with Joe Clark at his study. He was laid to stay in the Hall of Honor, where 10,000 Canadians passed his casket in 2.5 days. He was later put on a slow train ride to Prince Albert, where he would be buried beside his wife. Thousands of people lined the rail tracks to see the funeral train pass by. Thousands of people also attended his funeral, where Prime Minister at the time, Joe Clark, read the eulogy. Many features in Canada we still see today were greatly influenced by John Diefenbaker, such as the Diefenbaker Bill of Rights, which resulted in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms to become into force a year after his death. He was the first Prime Minister to appoint females to a cabinet post and was the first Prime Minister to remove explicit racial discrimination from the criteria for admission to Canada under the Immigration Act of 1961, which was a factor in the creation of today's multicultural and multi-ethnic Canada. As his biographer Dennis Smith wrote of him, in politics he had little more than 2 years of success in the midst of failure and frustration, but he retained a core of deeply committed loyalists to the end of his life and beyond. The Federal Conservative Party that he revived remained dominant in the prairie provinces for 25 years after his leadership.